The truth of the matter is, I was glad, but at the same time saddened, that they had left me. It probably was better this way in the circumstances, but also knowing that I have been attacked several times by some of my so-called daughter's male clients. As far as one could see, the girls were supportive of each other, and in Birgit's case, she took sides with her mother and the witnesses. It was her choice. However, every one of them chose to happily continue accusing me with all kinds of ugly things because I was portrayed as the devil's advocate. Sadly, I could no longer trust my daughters, their mother, and the entire group of witnesses, deciding to have nothing more to do with those allegedly Jehovah's chosen, as they declared themselves to be. However, I have never been in favor of blaming others for any misadventures which were likely to happen around me. I tend to feel very sad to witness others' weaknesses and do not condemn them, rather seek reasons for their failings. I forgive without blaming, but unfortunately my closest always blamed me, feeling the need to do so to somebody who was an easy target. What I am about to say is not spoken lightly, born of prejudice or anger. Jehovah's Witnesses have done everything possible according to the will of their master, who could only be against the entire world in order to destroy families, taking control of all their lives and minds. Perhaps one should consider that they are the only ones who are against the Spirit, against every joy, and against everything wholesome. Theirs is, and can only be, a herd-like mentality and a great myth. However, they are happy with it, just the same as the one they all consider as the current ruler of the world they hate so much. Have you ever come across people who lived in two different worlds? A physical one, which every one of us is aware of, and the other an imagined one, which appears to be the only reality to the individual. You may also have been such a person, or may still be. How would you know what is real? How would you describe what reality is? On observation, many religiously fanatical belief systems knowingly or unknowingly promote certain changes in their adherents' unconscious or conscious minds. From religious denominations to the historic Nazi regime, from known political systems to communism, as we have discovered throughout man's history, they all seem to follow the same. Call it mind control if you like. In real terms, if you think you have a free will, and you are absolutely free to think and be, think again. On the other hand, extremist thinking can be blinding or, at the same time, liberating for one. We have seen many examples of this throughout the history of mankind and their belief systems. People who promote an ideology often do it in good faith, believing it will create the desired effect. It is mainly to benefit themselves or the participants as they imagine. In the quantum way of thinking, both ends of the path may be considered. However, both sides of the situation under observation need to be thoroughly examined. At least this gives us the chance to be free to choose what we really wish to look for and follow. This is classified as liberal thinking. Let us not forget that some of us are born characteristics of living in two different worlds, where there needs to be a balance between the two ends. But the chances are that one side becomes the dominant one without being noticed. Now consider a woman standing at the door with her child, instructing the young one to be very cautious when crossing the road. Suddenly, a car skids on the road in front of her, because the driver has only just noticed the red light. The mother starts panicking and shouts about her child being hit by the car without it being so. For a brief moment, she could not see the child standing next to her, because she was only seeing the imagined realism in her mind and not the physical reality. Her heart rate increases, and she feels devastated until the young one taps her arm, asking, "Mom, are you all right?" She takes a moment before recovering. There are also people who do not recover so easily, and keep believing in their newly created fantasy tragedy. Have you ever observed something like this? I have. Children who are raised believing that the world is full of evil and a dangerous place usually grow up into people who easily panic. Many religious belief systems, using mind control techniques, encourage their congregations to be vigilant at all times in pleasing their Lord, so that they will be rewarded favorably in the afterlife. People who are generally disappointed with the aspects of the life and death cycle of their earthian existence are usually eager to listen to those learned men and women as their leaders who have wonderful tools to promote continuity of life and the rewards as promised in those well-known holy books. Many fanatical belief systems have been created throughout the centuries. People usually have no time to think, for it is also taken away by work and other concerns of their lives, food and entertainment, so they seem to find comfort in belief systems they adhere to. We are not in any position to judge or condemn them as good or evil, but we cannot ignore the curse of humanity, which is their extremism in all kinds of things. Some of my past associates belonged to that category and were very extreme in their superstitious beliefs, without being aware of it. Some saw nothing else other than darkness everywhere. They found comfort in turning the key by praying to an elusive supremacy for the light to shine, and for divine protection against the evil in the world. My very first serious love, who later became my wife, also belonged to that category, giving me no chance but accept her as she was, although the fanaticism from her mind controllers, the witnesses she was a part of, never gave her a chance to see anything else other than an evil world in darkness. I know that some of us are born with this mindset, which leads to the development of fertile ground where they became naive, needing to be led. I'm not going to ignore the possibilities of such characteristics being created by religious intolerance and mind control systems during people's adult years. I'm also not going to ignore the fertile ground theory. Magda's firstborn had very similar or same tendencies where her imaginations were prioritized. This is where she created her own fears and unreasonable panic. This is also when Annette believed she saw skeletons above my shoulders with blood gushing out from their eye sockets. Who knows what else she was led to believe seeing? She often repeated her dreamt of stories, and interestingly this convinced Birgit into also claiming to see skeletons or skulls as her sister did. Some suffer from the men are evil syndrome, others that people who are disfellowshipped can only be wicked and telling lies syndrome. The most important one is still Mother knows best. Mom is in the truth, therefore she never tells lies. Remember, even when Mom can be totally wrong, she is always right. Their mother has trained her daughters well to believe that they are surrounded with an evil world, and this is where their father belongs. However, I am not blaming her for being the way she was, for it is how she was trained by her Jehovah's Witness masters. She could only see evil in him because of the unending propagandist dictates from her associates. The witnesses could not afford to lose her, for she was an asset, perhaps in the kitchen preparing tea for her brothers after the service, completely dedicated to their cause, preaching about their archaic truths. A murderer or child abuser can go scot-free amongst them as long as they show some remorse. In fact, pretense would suffice. They are certainly never reported. They may even be blessed by their congregations, whereas a person showing signs of inquisitiveness, asking questions, is condemned and disfellowshipped. They are shunned forever, and everything possible is done by the seemingly spiritual witnesses through psychological propaganda to separate their families. Can one consider this as living in reality, or is it only a dream? Before my London adventure, I needed to move out to find some solace, and so stayed at a very lovely classic Victorian house next to a flower shop on Williams Road. One day, after my usual grocery shopping, walking home on High Street, I was attacked by a short Greek man. At first he attempted to throw rocks in my direction, and I stopped to see who that mentally unstable person was. Then a chubby, short young man emerged from the typical roadside crowd, at first hesitantly approaching and grabbing my collar. Since I had not been violent to anybody, and always avoided conflicts with people, it was most unusual, and I thought that perhaps this foolish person wanted to rob me. He was wearing a pale-colored woolen jumper with the name Nick on his chest. He might have been a professional bouncer, confident to start a conflict in order to fight me. I told him to put his hands down immediately, but he excitedly kept saying that I deserved to die. Besides, he continued, I don't even like your guts. This was going a little too far. I have been carrying a pen gun, given to me as a gift by a friend, hoping I would never need to use it. I was carrying it because I had heard so many ugly stories about people getting hurt. At the time I was not aware that it was illegal to have something like that in Victoria, but I needed to defend myself against this somewhat brainless man, even if it meant that I could be charged for carrying a firearm or accused of murder. In my mind I wished that this would not eventuate, but I felt the need to be prepared nevertheless. He kept shouting at me, What's your name? I think I'm with the right person. You deserve to die. I calmly asked him why it was so. He raised his voice and said, You know it. But I did not know anything, and did not know what I was accused of, and again asked him if I did anything wrong to him. He kept shouting, You know it, you know it. Luckily, after a while he appeared calmer, for I felt the need to test my special pen. While in his excitement he managed to utter few more words. This time I will let you go, but next time you see me, run. I regretted every moment of that occasion, and for not silencing him then, knowing it would become a matter of self-defense. I am also exceedingly happy for not being forced to become a criminal. I could have used some of the fighting techniques gained in my self-defense training, causing him major damage, but he obviously did not realize that. After we parted, thanks to my calm nature, I remembered him shouting as he left, Don't you dare reporting me to the police, repeating over and over. But I did, and even provided them with his picture, which I drew. This image was precise in every detail. However, all the police did was advise me that it was probably a prank, but if it happened again, I should call them. That did not sound right, and they were obviously not going to do anything about it. I could not wait to go home and empty the plastic bag attached to my leg under my trousers, wishing that the wretched inflammation would be gone soon, for the whole situation was very uncomfortable. Much later I learned that Nick was one of Annette's many sex partners to whom she had complained about me, with a multitude of supposed wrongs as well as her dreamt-of fantasies. She had either paid him with money or sexual pleasures to do the deed, as she saw fit, someone to kill her father, the evil man. According to Birgit, as she had witnessed the situation, when that young man returned back to Annette's home, she asked him if he did the job, and he worryingly told her that he could not. Birgit later informed me that Annette was uncontrollably angry and very furious with him. Even if I was such an awful creature, doing ugly things all the time, it was an inappropriate and evil way to handle the situation. She could at least clarify why she had entered my room the way she did. Apparently, Birgit was begging Annette not to go ahead with her important project. This shows how much my daughters loved their father, remembering that hatred was their love. Obviously, I needed to feel really sorry for being their father and letting them live with me. However, we all make mistakes, and forgiveness is one of the greatest and noblest endeavors humans can engage in. I can never forget her attempts to hurt me before. I cannot forget how hateful she was towards me after her abduction, and now I will never forget this wonderful memory she created. I wondered if her darling mother had known about it. Then again, she might have guessed, when you consider that her gorgeous daughter had attacked her with a pair of scissors with the intention to kill. She might have thought that Annette was under the influence of the evil man, who, as they so ardently declared, had to be me. I firmly believe that the Jehovah's Witnesses were and are the greatest evil the world has ever known. Some years later, while I was chatting with my friend Andreas on the corner of Collins and Swanston Street, we both noticed how a well-dressed young man, having discovered me looking in his direction, started to run in extreme haste towards Elizabeth Street and further. It was Nick. It was so strange to see this. In fact, my once-upon-a-time daughter has proved how untrustworthy she was right from the beginning. I felt sorry for young Nick for believing in what my so-called daughter had convinced him of in order to kill me. I honestly felt very sad for any man being involved with her, for I was certain she would make every one of them very unhappy. Has she changed since then? I sincerely hope so. In truth, I am so pleased for having completely removed them from my existence without any regret. Although I have forgiven all the wrongs perpetrated against my person, it is impossible to forget one's past. I could only wish her the very best life could provide. No, my once-upon-a-time beloved child, I was not what others of evil intent have conditioned your mind to see in me, like those bloodied skulls you claimed to have seen above my shoulders. Indeed, I had a genuine human skeleton, but it was part of my medical studies. Believe what you want, but I was not desirous to shock any of you, and so avoided showing that box full of bones to anyone. It was not due to my practice of black art, as some Jehovah's Witnesses, just like the Strohbachs and your mother claimed. It was part of my study, which none within our family wanted to understand or appreciate. Being the oldest, you had a great influence on your young sister, and in her imagination she also claimed to have seen those skulls. What you have seen was imagined, not real. You know this is the reality. Unfortunately, your mother could only see me as an evil person, but I have never been an evil man. The truth is that you were a great dreamer, and your imagination was wrongly guided. When you tried to justify yourself, you did so simply to destroy me altogether, not only my reputation. I also know that you, like your sister, mother, and a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses, will choose not to believe whatever I attempt to say. However, without justifying myself, I will tell you that I was suffering ill health at the time of your destructive attitude towards me, and I did not have the strength or stamina to fight for justice. After all that, I am so very grateful that we parted. As you may well know, I was accused of wrongdoing simply because I was a man, but you must know that I was never a monster. Regrettably, your mind had been filled with all kinds of possible fantasies of the ugliest kind, where I was painted completely black and very evil. Your accusations were due to your mind being so twisted into believing in falsehood, just like your dear mother. Any kind of accusation needs to be analyzed thoroughly as to why and how it was made, under what circumstances, and other triggers leading to what was seemingly complained about. No, I am not going to blame you entirely. You said you hated your mother, but I say to you, like the same magnetic fields of two magnets repelling each other, you felt the same as what you supposedly hated in her. I suppose you could only hate, for your love was hatred, and this attitude might have been genetically passed on to you. Now you might be angrier with me. It is entirely up to you. However, my love and forgiving nature is unconditional. Your mother did not deserve your hatred, for she gave you birth. Remember, you always had to have the same experiences, heartaches, traumas, and monstrosities as your friends. You could not have any less. You followed your all-knowing friend's advice, telling me how you could have me put behind bars. As I said before, your endless hate was your only love. Simply put, your love could only be hate. This was the result of living a life of complete opposites between me and the Jehovah's Witnesses. Throughout my marriage, Magda, your mother, made me feel that I was married with the mob, and not with her. I am sorry about you wanting to kill your mother with a pair of scissors. Obviously, you have conveniently forgotten every good deed and sacrifice your parents made. I can only hope that you are more mature now. Under the circumstances, I feel so devastatingly sorry for having become your father. Despite all your unbearable nature as an angry teen, I am going to forgive you, but you will never again be part of my world. In fact, it is a lot easier to consider you as never having existed. The otherwise would only be possible through a spectacular miracle. Do you know why I am forgiving you? It is because I am an honest man. I shall never forget what you told me in front of your sister. You showed me your ultimate plan by entering into my bed while I was drifting into a much-needed sleep, which was abruptly broken by your behavior, and I am glad I woke up. However, I know for certain that Birgit and your mother are, as they were, extremely adamant in believing that I am a cheat, due to being shunned by the witnesses. Could this also be because I did not accept Annette's proposal when she inquired of me, "Hey, Dad, if I had a baby, you could look after it"? On top of all those awful circumstances I was subjected to, in addition to ill health, I began to experience a severe case of depression. I had to come out of it quickly, and so set myself to create a large quantity of oil paintings and sculptures. I had an exhibition of my artwork, and was discovered by members of the Armenian community in Melbourne. By special invitation, I frequented the old Armenian community center, where they were trying to raise funds for their local church. This is where I met Vartan from Canada, singing Armenian and Iranian popular songs with the accompaniment of his own music group. My life was moving from one extreme to another in chaotic haste. At this time, I met Sona and her family. She had 2 daughters, and her husband had left her. Her socialite mother and father ardently tried to encourage me to start a relationship with their daughter, who had suffered a lot in her marriage and health, for she apparently had double hysterectomy, constantly inviting me to their home. Sona's daughters developed a liking to me, for they have experienced my drawing skills and gentle nature, which my own daughters never appreciated. Sona was a professional belly dancer, and was tutoring a group of ladies and hopeful of rebuilding her family. However, my point was made very clear. I could be a reliable friend they could talk to, and I could visit them from time to time, although I needed to recover from my own ordeals before I could consider starting any new friendships. Her mother eagerly talked to me about Sona, having experienced family breakdowns like myself, and we would be able to understand each other well and start a loving family. Besides, she often emphasized, your children have abandoned you as if you were a sinful monster and trash. They did not see what a fine person you are, and our granddaughters have never experienced having a loving father. I think that you should think about starting anew. It was probably very sound advice, and maybe I should have considered it a little more in depth, but my situation with my ex-family, which I wished had never eventuated, my emotional decline, and feeling insecure in every aspect had considerable weight upon my mind. On one side I thought it would assist me to leave all that ugly past and completely forget my children, who could only hate me, but on the other I could be involved with a family who appreciated me as I was, and they could also benefit to forget their bitter past. To create a meaning in this endeavor, I considered several options, such as polishing my knowledge of Armenian with the children who spoke the language perfectly, and I could help them with my lingual background, probably teaching Sona's daughters English expressions, and particularly French, on a regular basis. Sona and her parents were very happy with this arrangement. I once again became Father Christmas, although Magda would probably drown me in a drop of water if she knew. I joined in other occasions, such as the Armenian Olympics events, and a number of fundraising dance parties, filming them. Vartan was keenly interested in my videoing and recording talents, wanting me to help him transfer his Canadian performances recorded on professional tapes from NTSC format to the Australian PAL system. I was happy to help him. Some guest performers visiting Australia, well known all around the world, have given concerts where I used my expertise in recording them professionally. The whole effort seemed to be used only for the Armenian Orthodox Church to assist their charity operations alone. Although I never professed to be interested in any type of religion, it was fine to help anything or any organization that was charitable and bringing smiles to the faces of the poor. But my entire artistic endeavors could not be used just for that purpose alone, and so I became a little more cautious. Sona's parents told me again very discreetly that when they departed this world, they wanted me to share their wealth, but that was not what I desired, and so I told them that their wealth could only belong to their daughter and grandchildren. At this time, Sona and her daughters used to frequent my place in Williams Road next to the flower shop, where I painted a mural on an exterior wall. One evening, sitting with Sona and her children, listening to Mozart classics, suddenly someone threw an average-sized stone through the window, which shattered the glass and fell behind us after hitting the heavy curtains. An initial inspection revealed that it was aimed at me, and the projectile was in line with my head where I was seated. We contacted the police, and they somewhat apprehensively suggested they would send their forensic team in the morning, but on arrival, and after a few tests, they could not detect from which direction the stone was thrown, and one even suggested it probably was from inside. That sounded so extremely ridiculous. Imagine Sona, myself, or her children throwing the projectile towards the window. However, if their forensic team had any interest in discovering what really happened, they would realize that the stone thrown from outside would bounce back after hitting the heavy curtains, causing further damage to the glass, as if thrown from inside. They did not see the importance of any further investigation. I knew that it could only be done by someone who had a grudge against me, knowing who I was and where I might be seated. That person could only have been either my extremely loving daughter, or one of her many boyfriends, just to please her, after foolishly being instructed and paid. Even Sona's daughters looked concerned, and I suggested that they should go home, because I was not sure if the incident would be repeated that evening, and I did not want them to be a part of the experience. The next morning I had the window repaired. I was really worried, for I had no room to be at, no place to call home, and no one to turn to. Sona's daughters were attending a jazz ballet school, and we were invited to enjoy their concerts. I met an Indian child and her mother on one of those occasions, and she recognized me as the father of the little sweet boy Claude, who was taking part in her daughter's dance class a while ago, and wanted to tell me they had heard so many things about his father, who had apparently abandoned him. That was the final straw, and so I decided to tell them how the story unfolded in reality. The gentle Indian lady said she could not believe what those ladies were telling everybody about Claude's background, and she did not even know who the real mother was. It was unusual for such well-presented women to talk about Claude's father as if he was a real monster, and now, after what she had discovered by meeting me, she knew their allegations were baseless. I became friends with them. I was very saddened once again about this Jehovah's Witness-induced anomaly, and Magda wanting to keep the boy to herself alone, while turning him into a Jehovah's Witness automaton, perhaps believing it to be Jehovah's will, forgetting, however, that it was more like the cult leader's will. There was a time when Sona wanted to visit those gentle people of Indian descent, and I was surprised when their grandmother of high social standing entertained us with playing a few classical pieces on the piano. When Sona's daughters mentioned that I played the keyboards, they wanted me to also do so. Indeed, they all discovered what kind of person Claude's father really was. Several days later, one morning, about 4:35 a.m., a few rough-looking guys came to my address urgently, noisily knocking at the door, as if they wanted to break it down. I was already dressed, and as I opened the door, they greeted me with all kinds of expletives, shouting loudly, like a huge trumpet, about an unpaid account. I was shocked by this treatment, and as usual, softly speaking, I told them that their attitude was wrong, that they did not need to wake everybody in the neighborhood. There was a lull for a brief moment. Then one of them told me they were from the sheriff's office, and it was urgent that I should contact the finance company about an unpaid loan which I had no idea about. Whenever I wanted to buy expensive items, I always saved up and then bought them, or else put them on lay-by. A close inspection showed that the note issued by the finance company was addressed to a Mrs. M, and not to a Mr. S, and the address was certainly not mine. I even had to go to the magistrate's court to clarify matters. To make things worse, on arrival a couple of police officers grabbed my arms tightly, as if I was under arrest. I felt violated, obliging me to tell them not hold on to me, as they did, for I was not going to run away. I was going to walk with them. That was extremely ugly. I had always been gentle to everybody and was never involved in any criminal activity. I was certainly not in the drug trade, and was therefore stunned by the way I was treated so roughly. Maybe it was a case of mistaken identity. I thought that perhaps my wonderful daughters, with the permission of their mother, or Jehovah's Witnesses, were finally succeeding with Annette's promise of putting me behind bars. Obviously, it was not a matter of what one knows, but who one knows. Since they were so hateful, and could not be any other way, this kind of action could be expected from such loveless and cruel people. Throughout human history, the innocent have always suffered. The whole idea was obviously geared to cripple me, so that a bad mark could be etched against my name, and this way I would have a bad reputation, stopping me in my tracks whenever I wanted to undertake a new direction or apply for a loan, but I was going to stick with better methods of purchasing the things I desired. I was advised to pay it in small amounts or declare myself bankrupt, since I had nothing to lose. However, as it was clearly not my debt, I was not going to do that at all. At that stage it was hard to guess what else I was going to be asked to pay for. The situation did not look promising, but some ingenious thinking has taken care of that. In reality, I just had enough. It was time to move out from where I had been staying, and was contemplating finalizing all my involvement with a variety of projects, and stop any possible development of all romantic relationships. Although I made no mention of my plans to my new Armenian friends, and I was not obliged to do so, I was not going to further any possibility of romantic dreams. They had enough problems of their own, and I did not want them to share mine as well. But there were other elements to my final decision about Sona and her parents. One fateful weekend, they were going to visit their friends whom they had not seen for a while, and wanted to introduce me to them. We met at Sona's parents' home, and having driven a short distance, we arrived, and on entering the luxurious house of their friends, Sona's mother lost her footing while standing next to me in the passage, and fell on her left side. She did not realize that there was a short step. In that instant I could not help her, but was shocked and felt numb and speechless. When others rushed to her aid, I stepped aside, and they took her to hospital. Later it was revealed that she had apparently pulverized her shoulder, and I was terribly saddened about the whole event, wishing she would recover quickly. Later I met Vartan, who worked at his brother's car yard. While organizing my trip to the United Kingdom, I did not frequent Sona's house as often, and whenever I attempted to contact them, they appeared unwilling to communicate with me. I put it down to their being concerned about their mother, but Vartan told me that they believed I must have done something wrong, like black magic, to hurt my possible mother-in-law. For some peculiar reason, this hateful anomaly had become a tradition in some cultures, for I have met people who constantly complained about their mother-in-law. Vartan also told me that the entire family believed I had probably pushed her so that she would fall and die. How was it possible that I have presented such an unfortunate image to people? But I liked that woman as a wise, mature person, as one could learn a lot from. She was very knowledgeable about Armenian history, and very logical in her wisdom. I certainly had nothing against her. This was just too much. Upon this I decided never to associate with any of them again. That friendship was completely over. I would have preferred to forget the whole story, but it was impossible, for I am like an elephant, unable to do so. Primarily, I was never a man of evil intent, and I had already been accused of being evil, by Magda as well as her controllers, and my children, who were led to believe that their mother could only tell the truth, as a good Christian. However, some Armenians are also known to be extremely superstitious, and I was not going to put up with such nonsense any more. A few days later, Vartan asked me if he could make love to Sona, and needed to ask my permission, since I was her boyfriend. This made me wonder why such an unusual request was seen fit. Was this some form of tradition I was unaware of? I told him never to ask me such an ungainly question, as it did not belong to the traditions I was accustomed to. Besides, I did not own anybody. However, he continually asked that since she was still my friend, could he make love to her? Was he on some hallucinogens? This had to be the final full stop. I was better off leaving it all behind. In regard to my beloved son, Claude, it was most unusual for Jehovah's Witnesses to approve or support entertainment of any artistic kind. I wondered what made Magda have a change of heart, allowing him to take part in ballet classes. Was it because his teachers at school discovered some talent with him? If it was true, and the school was presenting a program where Claude would take part, I would discreetly go there, for I had missed him a lot. On the other hand, it felt as if Magda's close associates, and probably her beloved daughters, were chasing me, so that they could inflict me with maximum pain, for their love would certainly involve great harm. I wondered if that was the godliness they preached about, or the real evil. This feeling remained with me for a long time. Although they always called themselves God's only chosen and the real Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses could only be a cultist organization when considering what harm they have caused to multitudes of people throughout the decades. Should they not be classified as an evil organization also? Any organization which controls the thoughts of individuals with repetitious propaganda and monotony, giving them no freedom to think for their own selves, cannot be anything less than cultist and evil. This has been said in good faith that it is understood as no condemnation or judgment against any belief system, for it is a matter of freedom of choice. When we make a comparison between the Witnesses and other belief systems, such as spiritualists, we can easily detect that the Witnesses only read their Bible partially and not practice what they preach, whereas the spiritualists do exactly what Jesus commanded them. Matthew chapter 10, verses 7 and 8 contains these holy commands. Heal the sick. Freely ye have received, freely give. According to the Holy Scriptures, Jesus has done so, but what about those who preach under that invented title of Jehovah's Witnesses? I would ask them, do you heal the sick, like the spiritualists believe? Do you comfort the mourners, like other churches do? Do you feed the hungry, like the Catholic Church and others do? What charitable organization have you created for the needy? Was it not you creating a facility purely for Jehovah's Witness elderlies in the U.S. with caregivers employed from within your own organization? We know this to be so, and likewise obtaining government funding for your own ends only is also true. It seems that this is the only such facility in the world. Jehovah's Witnesses never help anybody else. They prefer to just condemn and shun people who question their teachings and the authority of their U.S.-based organization.